Gotta remember that.
Making faces at him. Will be recorded.
You mean I shouldn't have the obvious faces when he says something? I'm like, ooh.
Right?
Don't be Will Smith.
Oh.
Yeah. I don't watch award shows.
I don't either.
I don't either, but I got to
I
see
got
it on
today.
TikTok, YouTube, and everything else. Oh no.
Wayne, are you ready?
All right, we're going to go ahead and get this work session meeting started on time, since I know we have a lot to go through. Al, roll call.
Benson.
Here.
Brunig.
Here.
Johnson.
Present.
Mybom.
Present.
Schramm.
Here.
Villanueva.
Here.
Mayor Mosher.
Here.
City Manager Leon.
Here.
City Attorney Denherder.
Here.
All right, now's the time for anybody of the public that wants to address the commission during the work session on something not on the agenda. All right, seeing no movement, I will turn it over to City Manager Leon so we can discuss the old water plant.
Thank you, Honorable Mayor, members of the commission, and public who are listening in. Picking up where we left off a few years ago, tonight wanting to visit with you a little bit more in depth about water plant number 1. And you have hard copies there of the PowerPoint presentation. We found out that the link was either not imported correctly, or some folks had trouble opening it. So you may not have had a good look at the PowerPoint. So we'll make sure we go through it a little more thoroughly than we had planned to when we get to that point. But just for a little history for folks' benefit who weren't involved, we went online with our new water treatment plant 2019 to late 2019, and we didn't vacate the old water treatment plant right away for a couple of reasons. One, we were using it for storage and transition, and then when the pandemic hit, we thought, well, let's not move forward here for another reason. We didn't know if we were going to need the space for separating people, and then we also weren't sure if it was the timing was right to be diving into this building reuse. So we put that on hold and wanted to pick that back up again to see what your direction was. So throughout the years, we've had a couple of people interested, a couple of interested parties in the old water treatment plant. If you have not been in the plant, Kyle and his staff are happy to give you a tour. I would suggest that you might want to do that before we decide exactly how to move forward. Because if you do decide to move forward with a RFP to see what kind of proposals we might get on reuse, I think that we would definitely want your input on some of the things we want to include, because there's some definite challenges associated with the building, and Dave will get into those a little more when we talk about the plant in a little more detail. So I think you'll have a couple of things to talk about this evening and to consider this evening, and as we go forward here. I don't think that we would ever want to, you would ever want to, but you tell me, sell that building. I think that before I saw the interior of the building, I was really excited about all the fun and creative ideas we can come up with for that riverfront ideal location. But once you go in that building, some of your enthusiasm wanes a bit, because there's lots of problems, including it being very chopped up. There's a lot of pumps and things in the building that are, size of, small cars, I suppose. And there's also a lot of vessels and concrete tanks and things like that. Of course, with enough investment, anything is possible. So there is a possibility to do something different there. We have a little bit of limitation on the space, even though it's located in a beautiful place. There's a little bit of limitation in terms of parking at that location, and you all know the confines there. So in the interim, between what you decide that you would like us to go forward with, and now we'd like to talk about using it for some storage for some of our departments that need it. So we would like to get it cleaned up a bit. And it's in pretty good shape, but we would like to get it cleaned up a bit so we can use it at least for that in the interim. But with that, I'd like to have Dave walk us through the PowerPoint, and please ask questions as we go along, and then we can certainly talk about next steps when we get through the PowerPoint. It should be on your screen in front of you or up here behind us.
All right, thank you, City Manager Leon, Madam Mayor, members of the commission. Amy is exactly right in saying that if you haven't been in there, it would be really important for you to get in there. It was built to be a water plant over 90 years ago, and it did an awesome job of that for a long time. It wasn't built in with the thought in mind of repurposing the space, so as she said, there are a number of challenges. The other thing we changed about 5 minutes ago was how I was going to do this presentation. I was going to kind of just gloss over things in hopes that we would have had a live functional link over the weekend, but we did not, so I'm going to spend a little bit more time touching base on some of the things. We have an overly wordy PowerPoint, and that was done so intentionally so that it would be consumable for people and they could see it, not just over the weekend, but in the future here, and understand the presentation without having somebody like me having to stand up and say it. So the second slide is actually a video fly around, and thanks to IT, they really helped with these slides and the technology that they have available with the drones. So I'm not going to sit and watch a 2-minute slide with you right now, but when you get to the link and do that, it shows all the different views of the site, and we'll have some pictures of this later. As mentioned, it was built in 1929, and it had multiple renovations. One thing that's important to remember is the property it sits on is what's called fee title property. In other words, we actually hold title to it. It's not right of way or something of that nature. And it's also not in resolution. It's never been designated as a park. So that gives you a little more flexibility in what you can do with it. If it was property that was designated as a park, there'd have to be an election process actually to make certain decisions. It was vacated by the water department just pretty much last fall. You guys were, Kyle and his crew were using it even after it wasn't pumping water anymore as kind of a transition location. You're going to see this map a couple times throughout the presentation just because we got a fairly wordy presentation, and it's always good to kind of revisit and reset by looking at the map. The important aspect of this slide is to kind of remember in the center there where clear well number 1 is, that's been removed. And it's also extremely important to remember where clear well number 2 and 3 are. Those are still in place. So that limits the amount of ground that could be included in anything that would require carrying capacity, parking lot, any weight bearing sorts of things like that. So it's zoned ag, as many of our parks are. Sounds kind of strange, but that's not unusual. So any reuse scenario, whether it would be a sale or a lease, would include a rezoning, and obviously it's next to a bunch of our B3 Central Business District parcels, so the recommendation would be to do that. There's to go through a rezoning process to do that. There's underground storage basins to the east, as mentioned, and the unique aspect of this, when we get into the structural analysis in a little bit here, that looks pretty good, but the unique aspect of it is demo, because of how it's constructed, would be extremely expensive. Right now in code enforcement actions, we can remove a home that has a full basement for $20,000 or $30,000. This is tenfold out of that league as far as what it would take if we just wanted to be looking at property. And that's just a guess based on what we've seen. So
Dave, can I ask you a question about the property? So when you say none of it is designated as a park, that goes all the way to the bridge then? That whole area is?
That's from the title work that was done when the bridge was built. That's our understanding, correct. Current status. So it's got the correct electrical and plumbing services available to essentially be an office and a garage and a shop. If somebody was proposing some use there that would require a higher level of service, there'd be a significant investment in additional utilities. The heating and AC, the HVAC, is functional for the office and garage area in the wintertime just to maintain comfort. It's not functional from an air conditioning standpoint where you would consider it acceptable for occupancy based on any modern standards. And restroom facilities are basically shop restroom, not something that would really be reused. Here's the good news. The engineer structural assessment was all in all pretty good, and we had NOR Engineering go through and check all the foundations, do a complete analysis that included roof and plumbing and windows and everything. Yeah, it's an older structure and it's got some wear, it needs some tuck pointing. It needs some roof work or potentially even a roof replacement. There's some grading issues. But all in all, structurally, it's a fairly sound building. Recommendations for future reuse from the engineer as they were doing the analysis. They determined that the structure could potentially even support an additional story, just based on how it's constructed. They even reviewed the possibility of having a structural floor that would span the clarifying rooms and allow for open storage. So right now you've got these big basins, and we'll see some pictures of it coming up here. But they could have a deck constructed over them and serve as a large floor area. There's still a significant number of tanks and things that are below level. The other piece of good news that we were really worried about with the structural analysis was, when those tanks don't have water in them, would they have the possibility of deteriorating because they don't have that hydrostatic pressure holding the walls out? Does that mean that if there's ever any soil pressures or water pressure on the outside, would they be in jeopardy? And the engineer's analysis of that was that no, they would not be, and they would actually are above where normal groundwater levels are in that location and shouldn't have issues with that. So they would be able to stay there and be dry and not be in danger of structural issues associated with not having the water in them. That's a lot of knots in one sentence, I'm sorry. Hazardous materials assessment, yeah, there's some asbestos abatement that should occur, and that might be something that we talk about doing no matter what happens with it. In any scenario, based on some of the more recent abatement projects we've done, we're estimating there's a $10,000 to $15,000 abatement project that should probably just occur even if we don't make a decision to do anything, or if you decide whichever way you want to go, you might want to just get that taken care of. And there's a lot of non-friable asbestos also that can be removed and disposed of in more standard means. So there'd be a contractor that specifically addresses those sort of issues involved in capturing the friable asbestos and removing it. The rest of the things that were noted are all pretty standard for buildings of that age, so not anything that was too surprising from a reuse standpoint. Same picture again. The thing I guess that you can really see after hearing that other information is when you look in the upper left-hand corner of this picture, those basins actually go out under the grass and under the sidewalk up towards the street right away. So I know there was talk about, hey, well, there could be a bunch of parking potentially along that street there, some diagonal or head-in parking or something there. Well, there's a basin under that sidewalk, so that really isn't an option either to park over the top of it to try and gain some street-type parking, street-side parking.
With the tanks that are scheduled to be removed, or I guess my question is, are they scheduled to be removed, or is it just saying they
So
will?
those underground basins will be there as long as the building is there. Those are part of what's holding the building up.
Yeah, And I'm talking about the external ones on the east and west
The
sides.
Clearwell number 2 and 3, Kyle?
Clearwell 2 and 3 have to stay. That's what we consider our chlorine contact time, so that's actually critical infrastructure. And then you see the 2 tanks to be removed.
Yeah.
The CO2 tank and the lime silo, we'll be working on getting those removed this summer.
Yeah, in any event, those 2 tanks, those exterior above grade tanks should be gone no matter what direction we go. The next few slides are just pictures of different views. Obviously, one of the things to note is, wow, what a great location, what a great piece of property. The building is the primary liability of the site.
Dave, can you go back a couple slides to maybe that one? One of the things that I think would be nice to do, regardless of what your guys' direction ends up being, is, like I said, clean up a little bit around, and Kyle and his team that'll help when the lime silo and the other tank are removed. I'd like to have Parks do a little more, or help us out there with some of the vegetation that's right in front of the plant there. As you're walking across the bridge, as many of us do oftentimes, we see that concrete sort of blank slate or canvas. And so one of the things that a staff member had the idea, and I thought it was a great idea, if the commission was interested in budgeting a bit to do a mural, welcome to Yankton, or somehow something about Yankton there on that facade, just to soften that up a little bit. And we, I don't know what that would cost, so we'd certainly have to get that kind of to you, but and see what ideas people come up with. But we thought that might be a nice way, regardless of which direction you go. It's a space we're not using to really market ourselves or to welcome folks, and a lot of people see that as the first impression of Yankton.
So I've actually had 2 people, advertising companies, contact us. That wall that Amy is talking about is right here where it says lab. And as you're driving across north into town on the Discovery Bridge, that is an extremely visible location. And I've had 2 sign contractors ask if they can put digital billboards at that location. And one of them even said they might be interested in buying the whole site just to put a digital billboard on that location. So there's people thinking about different things on the site for reuse. That's that wall right there is very visible from the highway.
I would say if you're looking for input on whether we should put a mural there, I would be interested in that concept.
Okay, street level space. More information as far as what kind of usable space we're talking about. There's about 9,500 square feet that could be considered at street level. Now that includes the decking over the basins and things like that. So they're all broken up into different areas, and a number of the separating walls are load bearing. So that would, if you're thinking about that 9,500 square feet, it's not like a big open space in its entirety. It's broken into smaller various spaces. There are, or would be, a number of accessibility challenges for any potential reuse. And then again, that space on the east-southeast corner where the parking is, and where the old clear well was filled in, there's some additional property that could be used outside in this area. Just going to go through a bunch of pictures now of what the interior looks like. No need for commentary unless you have questions for mostly Kyle. These would be Kyle questions. So obviously there's the shop garage area. Back in the southwest part of the building where the basin room is. These are the types of wells, basins that you would consider potentially clear spanning to create some space. Offices circa 1960, 70, I assume. Lower level space, the only part of it that has any windows at all is on the south end. It's kind of a, I wouldn't call it a walkout, but there are windows facing south in the lower level. The basin area is 2,200 square feet, so there's a fairly good space down there. The problem is access to it is extremely limited, and there are no elevators or manageable stairways. Yeah, the East Reclamation Basin is essentially windowless and very thick concrete walls. So I don't know if that means it's an opportunity for storage or something for whatever occupancy's upstairs. But the reuse of it for occupancy really isn't in the cards based on its construction. And I just keep showing that picture in case it brings up a question after we talk about things. So the lower filter room you can see is in that southwest corner, and that's what that looks like inside. And that's the walkout. The intake room is that other kind of little, it's got octagonal components on it, the angled building in the southeast corner of the location. Could not really envision or reuse or too many opportunities for reuse. I'll just leave it at that. Challenges. On-street parking, City Manager Leon touched on that. Based on its location, if you were to try and work out some occupancy, that might include gathering space. With that building there, the building footprint itself takes up a lot of what that would be, and parking is fairly limited there. And then there's a residential street right to the northeast of it, and Cedar Street there. Vehicular access to that lower level, so when you wrap around the building on the west side and come in, that's actually got a special permit from the state of South Dakota across state right-of-way just for access for that purpose, for the water treatment plant. So there'd be a process involved if an alternate use occurred on the site. It needs some roof work. It might be a good idea to start trying to figure out what an entire roof replacement would cost. I think in the library budget next year, we have a roof for that building at $150,000. So if that gives you a ballpark of what roof work would cost. The area to the east, again, Clearwells 2 and 3 are low or no impact because of the underground basins. And I'll show you some pictures of the stairs in a second here, and there aren't any ladders. And the masonry construction, like I said, it was built to be a water plant, so everything is easily well beyond any normal structural construction thickness that you'd see in a bank or something like that. Pictures of stairs and the type of means of access to different levels. Site advantages, and I'm sure we can add a number of these to this list also, but obviously the view shed, it's an incredible piece of property right on the river. Like I said, the biggest liability might be the building itself. Highly visible to traffic crossing the Discovery Bridge. The exterior architectural features are unique and interesting, especially with that portion on the southeast corner. Easy access to the bridge and plaza downtown, other amenities, the trail, and it's in the Meridian District. So there's a picture of the view sheds out the windows and out the front door. If there was to be an RFP, we were just kind of brainstorming what would that process look like and what would we want to be thinking about. Thought significantly about sale versus lease if the direction is that one of those things were requested by the commission. And it just seems like it wouldn't be the right thing to do to actually transfer fee title to that property. But that's a city commission decision. You'd have to think about that. There So if it were to be occupied, it seems more probable that a long-term lease or might be a better idea that a long-term lease is the way to go. The problem with that is it's right off the bat a disincentive for the private investment, or whoever gets that lease. They're not going to be as likely or excited about putting significant resources into the location if it's on a leased property instead of the ownership. So we'd have to figure out how to balance that, and it might involve more city participation in structure maintenance on the front end anyway. Sustainable long-term development and maintenance of the site. If no matter which way it goes, we'd want to make sure that the contract language was very, very clear regarding that. It also has the location, not just looking at it, but looking from areas around it at the property. We'd want to make sure that whatever occurred there fit in the National Recreation River viewscape and the park system viewscape. So we'd have to be pretty careful about whatever lease or purchase agreement that was created to make sure that it would continue to be a good neighbor. If it were to be a sale, we'd obviously go through a process of platting it and rezoning it. If it was a lease arrangement, we could probably describe out a footprint and not have to go through that platting process. We were not able to identify any comps around the community for property like that. I mean, there just isn't. Commissioner Schramm, I don't know if you can think of one, but we looked all over the place, even looked in some other communities trying to figure it out. Yeah, and lease or concessionaire arrangements, we did some looking in other communities also, and not really a fit for that size building that we could find. If there were to be an RFP, expectations, obviously we would want to probably have something occupy the structure that promoted tourism or visitor and customer traffic and maintain the attractiveness of the view shed, not just from the building, but looking at the building also. No-nos in that zoning district would be outdoor storage or display of goods, manufacturing, other than what's permitted as light or defined as light manufacturing that can occur inside, but nothing sitting around outside. And the other contact that we've had, a couple of people interested and have called in are wanting to acquire it as a private single-family residence. And I don't know that as your staff, that I would recommend in favor of that. It seems like there's a broader community purpose for that location than that. But I have a person that contacts me once a month about that right now. So if it was a sale, we'd plat it, go through a rezoning process, and then develop the specific criteria for the RFP. If it was a long-term lease, much the same. It'd have to be long enough that people would be interested in investing in it, and then there'd have to be provisions in the contract for how they may or may not be able to recover some of that investment at the end of the lease. A rezoning, detailed RFP. There would probably be some more participation from the city standpoint in repair and maintenance, and we'd definitely have to get really specific with performance criteria. Internal reuse is something that City Manager Leon mentioned. Right now, we have a need for in one of our departments, the police department, for places to put things in a secure location. So we've got issues with the current locations that are being used with trying to maintain secure access. Indoor vehicle storage is a very difficult thing to find space to do. And something like that could also be looked at as an interim use and not even a long-term decision. So that is about 5 or 10 minutes longer than I wanted to spend, but I think what City Manager Leon said in the beginning is really, really important. That is, if you have not been in that building, you need to do that just to get a real idea of what opportunities and challenges there are. And with that, I'd turn it over to Kyle for I'd be happy to try and answer any questions, but I'm guessing we're going to lean on Kyle.
Hey, Dave, speaking of opportunities, so this area was specifically carved out as an opportunity zone. Mm-hmm. Has any individual or entity reached out to your office with that in mind?
Not with that specific thing, but I've had it in the back of my mind that, if the right project is out there, or if we wanted to recruit a project, that would be potentially a part of that package that you try and work into it.
Are you familiar with the terms around opportunity zones and the funds associated with them enough to talk about that? Only because the way that the PowerPoint got put together, and I understand staff's recommendation is a lease, that's not an option if we're talking about an opportunity zone.
Correct. And I know just enough about opportunity zones from a couple of years ago when they first came out that I would probably want to do more research to get back to you in more detail. But essentially, it becomes a owner-occupied project that provides tax incentives for the investors, for a group of investors. Is a very, you understand what they are probably better than I do right now. So, yeah.
Any other entities or individuals who came forward with revenue opportunities like the digital billboard signage that you mentioned?
I think the other people that have toured it, and Kyle can probably answer this question because he's the one giving the tours, are gathering place types of occupancies. So restaurants, that sort of thing.
We did have an interest at one time from someone who was interested in kind of expanding the theme of the sculpture walk area that is going on in the downtown and at the Riverside Park, and that individual was interested in the space some years ago, but that's no longer an opportunity. So the idea was there to kind of use it as a creating space, and we thought we weren't vacated from that property at the time, but we thought, well, maybe that had some potential in that it's kind of a manufacturing type or broken up enough that something like that might be able to occur there. But so that was kind of an interesting space.
The proposal was very interesting. It would, and the way the building was broken up maybe would have been advantageous for that purpose with, but as City Manager Leon said, that opportunity isn't available at this point.
Couple of them interested in office space also.
Okay.
Turning-
Professional space?
Yeah, professional office space.
So the groups that were more gathering place, I mean, parking's a pretty big limitation. What parking with respect to the residential neighbors to the north, I mean, what are we looking at for possible parking spaces? Is it 10, 20?
It would depend on, I'm trying to find a bigger map so we can look around a little better. Sorry about that. There's one of them in here that looks a little better. So it would depend on how the occupancies were broken down, Commissioner Schramm, depending on, if some of it stays office space or professional space, and then a smaller component of it is the gathering space, that will determine the amount of parking that they'd want. Now, if it is Zone B3 Highway or B3 Central Business, we don't have any parking requirements in that district. So the challenge in my mind is then, finding the map I was trying to find is the biggest challenge, but the challenge in my mind at that point is going through the rezoning process, and the neighborhood will have the opportunity to comment and be involved in that process, and trying to reassure them that people aren't going to be using their driveways for parking and things like that. But it's downtown, so and it's downtown residential, so I'm sure they're living that to a certain extent at this
Just the
point.
parking pad alone, I would say 12 to 15 maximum.
I'm sorry,
really.
was that the question?
That'd be tight.
And there is some room for expansion.
There's you can see that there's a pretty good drop off there, so that's why it's, yeah.
It would take a lot of fill.
The special state right-of-way to enter the bottom portion of that building, if it stays as a lease with the city, will that change as opposed to selling the property? So if it's an actual change it's no longer a water plant and we still own it, is that still good, or does that have to change?
I would think that we'll want to be in contact with the state as soon as we are coming close to deciding what direction we're going. They will typically DOT bases all of their determinations on use and occupancy and not who owns it. from what I've seen in their permitting processes. So there will be a process involved in that, definitely.
Do you know where the line is on that? Because if you were to remove the tank, there could be a possibility of an access coming down that direction. I just don't know where, any idea where that line is?
This gets pretty steep from here to here. So yeah, the line is probably left of the T on tank, kind of where those trees are probably right. Kyle might know better than me, but I'm guessing it's, yeah, I'm guessing it's kind of in this sort of area, if you can see see if I can get that view. Yeah, it would be left of that.
Yeah, and that's a pretty steep drop where the tank is, right? Like if you were coming from here, it looks like it's not that big of a deal, but I'm trying to picture it.
Yeah, I don't
Yeah.
think you'd be able to create a driveway access. Say this one was all on city property, it would be very difficult to drive in that
Drop it
manner.
from that direction, you
That's-
really need
yeah.
sure.
Kyle, in some of your research or discussions with other colleagues or contemporaries in other cities, have you heard of anything similar to this, what they would have used a facility like this for after they decommissioned it from a water treatment facility?
I have not. The only few that I know of were not in a location in a prime location like that, and they've basically just been converted into storage, but the location of those is much different. So.
Because I think of some of those old buildings in downtown Sioux Falls. Now, they weren't public buildings necessarily, but they've been converted into some really neat structures. But I guess I can't think of a public structure that was then converted to a private structure in our area. So it's just a really cool looking building. It's, I can see why people would want to live in it, but I wasn't one of the people that asked, by the way.
As far as the mitigation goes, I mean, I think that's something that we have to get taken care of. And we've got some, asbestos, some lead paint, some of those issues. Those things, I mean, it's going to be our obligation regardless, and going forward into the future, it's not going to get any cheaper. I think that's something that we just need to get taken care of, and then, what we need to have it so that the building is sound, so that we're being good stewards of the property, whether we're going to sell it or whether we're going to keep it. I think it's important that we're good stewards of public property.
Yeah, thank you for saying that, Commissioner Bruin. I think that regardless of what direction the commission takes, company's coming, and we should get the area cleaned up, get those tanks removed. I know that's planned. Remove that asbestos. The garage door that you see when you're walking across the bridge.
The one with the patina on it?
The patina.
Well, that's nice. You call it patina. I'm going to use that. It just doesn't, to me, look up to snuff and look like we're taking care of it. I'd like to get that painted. Mural is more cosmetic and aesthetic, so I mean, that could wait to me, the roof, we should look into getting a cost for the roof repair, finding out exactly what needs to be done there. We own it for better or for worse, and so I think we should, need to give it a little TLC. And whatever happens to it in the future, those things aren't going to go away just because so, and I think there's a lot of things inside of it yet that could go away as well. The big tanks and those things are cemented in there, they can't leave, but there's a few items in there that could be put on citywide cleanup, let's put it that way.
Yeah, I've had a lot of people look at the facility and tour it, and I was really surprised at what some of the people thought looked neat and they wanted to leave, whether it was pumps and lime slaker and some of the mechanical equipment they thought would be a neat. I don't know, their brain works different than mine, so maybe mine doesn't work at all, I don't know. But so we've kind of held back on removing anything. We could start going in and taking some of that other stuff, the pumps, motors, lime slick or some of that bigger equipment out if we want. But like I said, it's been really interesting at what some people thought was neat and that they would like to see left there. So we really haven't done much of anything in terms of removal at this point, so.
That roof situation, at this point, is it a remodel or replacement or just extending the life of the existing roof that you're thinking is going to be that $150,000-ish number?
So the way the engineer described it, there was some opportunity for some patching around the edges at this point in time. But Kyle's probably been in there when it rained hard, so.
Yeah, it goes back to some of the roof lines as different areas of building there and getting those repaired. I would hesitate to go in and do the whole roof right now based on some of the ventilation that we have in the facility, whether that would stay or go based on the usage of the building. And it gets to be pretty big when you start looking at removing the lines on top the facility and things like that. So for now, I think you could probably do some patchwork on some of those seams and get it watertight again. It's still going to be a pretty expensive repair, but I don't know if you'd want to get into the whole roof not knowing what the use of the building was going to be in the future.
How far is it right now from watertight? Would you guess? I mean,
I don't know. We've had it patched several times and it hasn't been successful. So I think there's probably some significant removal that has to be done to get down to where it needs to be. So, I mean, I think you're probably talking, over $50,000 just in patchwork, to be honest. So.
Sure. But
And that's I don't want to say a guess, but, that's an estimate. I'm not a roofer.
No, that's,
So,
I'm just trying to get an idea, because
Right.
I have not been in the facility. I don't know, but again, going back to being good stewards of it, I think those things are the things that we do need to get taken care of. Whether we're going to lease the building or sell the building, no matter what, we want to make sure that, we're taking care of doing the routine maintenance that we need to do as a public structure.
Well, one of the things I will do for follow-up is have Colleen reach out to Kyle and kind of get an idea of his schedule, and then reach out to you all individually and see, if you're interested and when you're interested. It's not warm inside, so maybe wait till our weather gets a little bit warmer here to take a look. But it's hard in photographs to really experience that building until you go in there. So it would be beneficial, I think, to go in there and take a look. And if you've been in there before, but it has been a long time, you might want to go in there now that most things are out of that building, so you can kind of have a feel for the space.
I'm going to go back to the digital billboard thing, since that's the only potential revenue opportunity that's been talked about here, but just to use that as an example. So I'm looking at like the Department of Transportation traffic rates for this area, I suppose. So it's fairly substantial. So Highway 81, so it's not an insignificant amount of traffic that's going to be traveling what would be north then to be able to see a digital billboard, for instance. My guess, I'm just throwing this out there, if we were to lease this out as an opportunity for somebody to put up a sizable billboard, with that in mind, we'd even be able to specify the fact that, hey, every 10 slides we want to see a mural. Every 25 slides we want to see a billboard that says, buy or lease this property, send us your imaginative ideas, whatever, that we could be pretty specific about the opportunity that, not everybody, I mean, I'd like to think that thousands of people are going to watch this video, but it could be a good opportunity to put the opportunity in front of a lot more eyeballs on a regular basis. So again, if I were to guess, I don't think it'd be crazy to expect anywhere between $30,000 and $50,000 a year to lease that area for a digital billboard. And we could even specify the time frame to say that it's a 10-year lease. But that could be in a dollar amount that maybe wouldn't even take effect the first year, because there's going to be a significant amount of costs that are going to have to go into a digital billboard getting erected there, but it's also a pretty good site. I mean, it's very visible, and the building would accommodate the power necessary to have a digital billboard going 24/7. So I'm open to a lot of different revenue opportunities for something like this, but this is the first I've heard about a digital billboard there, and I can't say it's something I'd right away take off the table, especially if we're going to get monies that can go towards these improvements. I guess not even improvements, it's just keeping things safe at this building.
Yeah, and as you can imagine, if there's consideration of something that's going to change the viewscape, there'd be a National Rec River process, so maybe be part of that too, but I don't know what that process looks like, but, and I don't know what the revenues would be. You probably have a better idea than that than I do.
Well, Mayor, what I'm hearing is maybe some folks want to get into the building and take a look. I think we should get some cost estimates on what that roof repair would look like and put together a plan to kind of shore a few things up in the building, and then encourage you all to have some conversation, with each other and with the community about what they think is a potential to have there. And we'll probably, like we said, utilize it for some storage in the interim, just because we need to, and it lends itself to that. But any other ideas that come by your way or that you have as you look at this further, we'll certainly, look into and investigate a little further.
I'm sorry. with the building and the green space that has the wells underneath it, are they wells or basins? I'm sorry, basins. Okay. Would that, if this was a lease or if this was a sale, would that green space go along with it? What are our thoughts on that? Or are we thinking that we would incorporate that into our an extension of Riverside Park, which is kind of the way it is right now? What are our thoughts on that right now?
So we hadn't really envisioned a scenario where anything east of the decommissioned Clearwell number 1 or basin number 1 would be used for an occupancy of the structure. And yes, you're exactly right. It functions as green space that's connected to Riverside Park. So, yeah.
So we would just be talking about the structure itself.
Yeah, I would say if it was either a lease or a purchase, you would be talking about the structure and this area here. You would not be talking about any of this area over here, unless there's some scenario I'm not thinking of right now.
So just to be clear on Clearwell 2 and 3, just every drop of water that leaves our water treatment plant has to go through what they call a chlorine contact time, where it has to be in contact with chlorine for so long before we can pump it out to our distribution system to our first customer. And what Clearwell 2 and 3 is that chlorine contact time. So our water is pumped into those clear wells, reacts with the chlorine before we pump it out. So they're critical. They're not meant to be driven on, built on top of. So that's going to remain green space that we're probably going to encourage people not to congregate on, vehicles on, and things like that. So.
Great. That's what I was thinking. I just wanted to clarify for the Clearwell.
Any interest we've had so far has been organic. We haven't really, it's more people reaching out to us because they know we've moved. We haven't really solicited anything. Nothing's really went out saying, hey, what should we do, right?
Correct.
So it's been organic. People really are just word of mouth getting in touch with us.
Yeah, I think a lot of it generated as the water treatment plant project was kind of in its midst, and the city commission actually had a discussion about what's the future of water treatment plant number 1 at the time. And after that discussion, we offered to the community, to those that called anyway, tours of the facility. And Kyle, you've given a dozen tours probably, or more. Just trying to, see what the community's thinking about the space too, so we could have this discussion with a little more information when the time came.
So from a process standpoint, if we are interested, if we are set on keeping this building and we want to encourage people to share ideas, do we proceed with the RFP process sooner than later, or do we focus now on the fixes that we need to do, and we can take time to give you input on what an RFP process might look like? What would be most helpful to you and on what timeline?
Well, Dave might have a different answer, but I would say if we're still really exploring, I think an RFP is a pretty formal process and indicates that, not necessarily you're certain to do a lease, but that you're pretty sure and pretty certain. So, to me, maybe if you're looking for ideas and creativity right now, that's what we ask the community for. And we can do that through, social media, or we can, encourage ideas other ways, if that's what you're looking for. But if you're certain that, yep, we want to do a lease and we want to have an RFP to see what's out there, we would need some time probably to prioritize that. And with building season coming up, I'm not sure that I'd have to get back to you on the timing of when we could get that put together for you to review, but we would do that. If we're still brainstorming, I hate to ask for, people to put time into their proposals with the intention that, if we don't know it's a possibility yet.
The one step we could take that I think is, pretty non-invasive, I guess, is to just go through the rezoning, which takes time also. So there's a few months involved in that. And that goes through a planning commission, city commission process, and that gets input from the neighbors because there's a notification requirement and there's advertisements. And when you do a rezoning, you are saying that anything that would be allowed in a B3 district would be allowed to occur there. And we're not able to, and you don't have to discuss a specific use when you're considering a rezoning. That's part of that. So I think that's something that we could do, in the coming months here, and you might get an indication of what the neighbors all think at that point.
What would your sense of, from a liability standpoint, if having a large group of people go through the building at one time? Like, I'm thinking if we have a social media campaign and an open house on a weekend or something to get people through, to give us ideas, to generate ideas, but I don't want it to be risky or liability from the city if there's too many people in that building and only so many people to observe and direct. I've held a few open houses before, and it gets a little crazy.
I'd be worried about, it's difficult to navigate the stairs without any mobility issues, and I feel like there's enough unknown things. I don't know.
Yeah, the access with the stairs and things like that, and then when you start looking at the slips, trips and falls, issues that you would have with the amount of equipment that is still in there, I would be a little bit concerned right now. Yeah.
I do have, I do it fairly regularly, 3D modeling for real estate listings, and I'd be happy to do that utilizing the Matterport service. And basically, if it would be something that gets spammed out there, it's an easy way to do a virtual tour of every single square inch of the property. So happy to do that. Probably would take about 3 hours, but I mean, it could be done. I'd feel better about doing that rather than, even a dozen people going through there all at once.
Yeah, that would be really generous of you. You know, some of the stairwells, for example, are very steep and they're worn. They're 90 years old, so they're kind of also rounded. And there was a point when I went down there with the police department that I thought I wasn't coming. I mean, they're difficult to navigate if you're, it's tough.
Yeah, and especially with large groups, it's really hard to keep, the rooms are so small and so broken up, it's really hard to keep people together, and you end up with people, I don't want to say wandering off, but some staying behind, some moving ahead, and it's an interesting tour to try to give.
All right, I think we have a good idea on how to move forward, and City Manager Malone, and you have a good list over there. I saw you writing down that we can kind of move forward, kind of get some more additional information as far as cleaning it up, roof, being good neighbors, and getting that area kind of beautified a little bit more moving forward. And then also, I guess, looking at possibly a rezoning to start getting that out there with the neighbors. I see a lot of heads nodding on that as well. So some things we can do to kind of keep moving this project forward and being able to see what might still be out there with interest. Is the commission good with that and what we've discussed tonight? Okay, then it looks like we have a small break before we would look at the city commission meeting. We do not have any other business in front of us tonight as far as the work session. So I would ask for a motion to adjourn the work session.
So moved.
Second. We have a motion and a second. All in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, nay. And anybody abstaining? All right. We will adjourn the work session, take a small break, and start back up with the city commission meeting promptly at 7.